Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Poland. Welcome to the Hello World Show. I'm Spencer Schneidenbach.
I'm Heather Downing.
And we are thrilled to bring you the 4th Hello World live show, first time in Poland, though, to DevConf.
So, Spencer, why did we decide to do this show?
Well, so our show is a YouTube show, which you can find at at the.hw.show. So we're a YouTube show, and the goal of our show was really to show off something visually to an audience, to developers new and old alike, to really teach them something visually in under 10 minutes. And somebody came up with the idea of doing the live show. I thought it was Heather. And then I found out it wasn't Heather, so we just started doing it, and it's I think it's turned out pretty well.
It has turned out pretty well. Yeah. So the reason for the 10 minutes is that I have a very short attention span. And I loved listening to podcasts, but they tend to get a little long. And so I'm like, I wish they would just get to the point, in like 10 minutes or so. And so I found that if we could constrain our speakers and our interviewees, we started getting some really fantastic content. And so over the years, we've traveled together and sometimes apart to different conferences, and decided, wouldn't it be great if instead of us just asking the questions, you guys got to ask the questions too? That's what we thought. So here we are.
Yes, here we are. And you can find us again at the.hw.show. No fancy website, just takes you to our YouTube page where you can see some of the interviews that we've already done, notably John Skeet, Richard Campbell, among others. And you can also find us on Twitter at the HW Show. And you can find me on Twitter at Schneidenbach. I don't expect you to remember how to spell it. Just look on the badge, right?
And you can find me at Coraline. All right, so how do we get these guys to ask questions during this presentation?
That is a great question in and of itself. So the way you ask question, if you want to interact, if you have our 3 panelists will show, our 3 guests will show us something, demonstrate, and teach us something. And if you have any questions about the content that they're showing you, go ahead and go to questions.hw.show, go on your mobile device, and type in your questions. I think that my favorite one was to John Skeet. They asked him, what's your favorite, can you sing us a song from your favorite musical? So the questions can be related to the content, or they could just be general ones. We'll have time at the end for just, for really whatever questions that we have left.
Right. Well, shall we introduce our panel?
I think we shall.
All right. First off, we have Kim Did I say that right? No.
No, you didn't.
It has kind of been the theme of this trip to mispronounce everybody's last name. But
it's Kim van Wilgen.
What you said.
Yes.
Yes.
I know her as Kim.
Kim is a mission-critical engineer at a new company that she just went to, and she's known for both her management skills and her technical abilities. So everybody, please, welcome Kim.
Next, we have a gentleman who works at the intersection of emerging technology and, what was the other word you said?
Design.
Design. Please welcome Steve Skolny.
Did I say that one right?
You got it, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And finally, we have Dave Aronson, who is the T-Rex, yes, that's his real job title, of Codasaurus LLC, a one-person software development shop located around Washington, D.C. Welcome, Dave.
Awesome. So the first person that we have up is Kim, and we'd love for you to come, and I guess you're going to be drawing, right? A little bit here on our whiteboard.
That's
Excellent.
what you told me. You said don't prepare anything.
That's right.
So
do it on the fly.
All right. Looking forward to it. And remember, in order to ask questions of Kim or any of our other panelists, go to questions.hw.show. Get your questions queued up.
So I have a backup phone because I didn't prepare, right? So what I wanted to talk about is the concept of self-steering and how to build autonomy. Because which one of you is in a self-steering team? Anybody? No. Who wants to be in a self-steering team or is hearing all these things about it? How do you do that? It's hard, right? I mean, you have to have management let go. You have to build trust. You have to have a team where people feel responsible. And those are a lot of steps. and you mess up on the way. And what I thought would be helpful, it's not a silver bullet, nowhere near it, but it's just a concept, and maybe you can use it actually to integrate it into your teams. I hope you will. I don't know if it works. I came to the idea talking to one of the attendees yesterday. I thought, okay, maybe we can use this. It's the model. It was already on the slides yesterday somewhere. Okay, this is how it looks. Like you have styles of leadership. There are persons. Is red a good color? No, it isn't. There is person attention, okay, and there is task attention. So I came from management, and I learned all these models. I didn't learn all the IT models that came later. And this is kind of the early knowledge, and that kind of stuck on you, right? Because it's what you learn early in your years will really stuck on you. That's why it's so important, because you have a role for the juniors in your team and also for the seniors in their team to guide them through this model. What it looks like is somebody can be new at a task or can be experienced at a task. Doesn't matter whether or not he's a senior. So someone who's very experienced as a back-end programmer can be new doing front ends. You'll need the same thing a junior developer needs. So you can have high attention over here. I have a terrible handwriting. And you can have low attention. I'll just put an L. And over here too, low attention for a person or high attention. Then we have these 4 quadrants. We have put everything in 4 quadrants. And there is this S1, S2, S3, and S4 model. These styles are directive, and that means you just tell people what to do. That's something we all have an allergy for, I guess. And style S4 is you're fully responsible and have mandate and have freedom to do what you think is best. So what everybody tends to do is, okay, we are over here, we have this directive manager, and we want to be over here. So it seems like we should do this. And that doesn't work. It's kind of a journey. You have to go this way, get them through change. And this part of the model, most people know that. I'll just have my backup phone because I have to look at the picture. So over here you have high attention on the task, but also high attention on the person. So what you do here is you say, okay, you're doing this task, this is how you should do it, but you start asking, why? Why is this the better approach? Do you have any ideas? Can you do this differently? Can you be innovative? So that is high attention on the person. Then you can get to low attention on the task because they know what they are doing, but you still need to have high attention on the person to let him feel safe and to allow him to safely learn new tasks. And only when he feels comfortable in his comfort zone, you can move to giving him authority. So that's basic layer 1 of this model, but there's much more to it. And that's the kind of part I really wanted to bring into this. Like, there are things that will help to move this way or this way. And that's the part that most people leave out. So over here, if you want to push people down, you have to be directing. I'll take a different pen because then it will better be readable, right? So if you're over here and you're directive, you will push people down and keep them task-oriented and keep them away from personal development. And if you're moving the other way, that's why you do guiding. So you give them a task, but you also tell them, okay, you're going to do this task, and when you come there, think, should you go left, should you go right? And tell me why. So that's guiding, right? And then over here, you can also go this way or that way. And if you want to go, above, you have to be explaining. This is what I learned doing this task, being a senior. So that's the way to actually get people to learn. And the anti-pattern here is being persuasive. Because when you're persuading, you're not open to actually
listen to the person who has his own ideas. You need to address them at full to actually give them the ability to learn. And then over here, I have to take a peek again. This way or that way. Here you can be encouraging. You can do this. You have so much experience. I've seen you grow. Encouraging, right? Or you can be problem solving. So when someone comes to you and he says, okay, I'm not sure. I think I've had a lot of practice, but I don't know for sure how to go further. Don't give him the answer when he's over here. Just encourage him. You know this shit. Take some time and actually solve this yourself. I have trust in you. And he will be able to do that, and he will grow. And then over here, if you want to go that way, you do monitoring. And if you want to go this way, you observe. There is a very big difference between these two concepts. And this is where it goes wrong. We are over here, we want to go over here, we just do this. So management says, okay, I'll let go. You be self-steering. And what does management do? They start monitoring. They see you screw up because you weren't ready as a team to be fully responsible and to actually take responsibility. So management is over there saying, well, they don't need us. Let's see how that goes. And then they start monitoring and they say, see ya, I told you so. So what happens is they say, okay, how are you going to solve this? How are you going to solve that? Pushing people this way. Then they say, oh, we have answers because we've been doing management. So they start giving you problem solvings and they push you back. And then they get persuasive. And from that point on, you're back in the directive zone in an organization that says, yes, we've tried self-steering, but didn't work for us because people couldn't take responsibility. Yes, you can, but you have to take people along this development. And if we learn this as developers, to do this ourselves, I'm certain that we can actually help people grow, because those early lessons, as I started with, will be the things that will really stick on you. So you have to make sure your junior developers in the teams, people with new tasks, are encouraged to actually be senior at that task. So that was the point I was trying to make.
Thank you, Kim. Do we have any questions from the panel first before we go ahead and continue with our audience? No? You good? I think you explained that pretty well.
Yes.
We do have a question. Is there any advice for those who've had the reverse career path from you? So they came from IT and went into management. Is there anything that they were missing that your background gave you?
Well, it is surprising what questions you get, right? Well, first of all, I think it will be important to actually think, what kind of manager do you want to be? Because that will also be the answer to what kind of organization do you want to work at. For instance, right now, I work at an organization that has no managers. They do believe in leaders. So whether you want to be a leader or a manager is kind of a difference. And what I like from this organization is that it allows me to actually be taking an overview, have responsibility, but do this without taking away any autonomy. If that's the kind of manager you want to be, seek an organization that fits that, because you won't find that anywhere. There are organizations that will get you into a lot of reporting or just taking the shit for everything the people are letting go. And your response will probably be that you're getting into monitoring and getting the hateful person. So think, what's management for me?
My question would be, is self-organization, getting to self-organization, is that right for every team? Or does it depend partially on the culture of the company?
I think it applies for every team that has knowledge workers, because those people have such extreme knowledge, and if you want to use it to its full potential, then you need to have people taking responsibility. And you can only take responsibility for full if you're feeling like you can actually steer the things and do the things you feel that are needed. It's not appropriate for instance, at the supermarket, you have a lot of kids working there besides school. I think don't ever make them self-steering. They will mess things up terribly, and they don't need to really think for themselves. They just need to hear, this is where the chocolate bars go in, and please do the hazelnut ones with the hazelnut sticker, right? So yeah, that's a different approach.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
All right. Up next, we have Stephen.
Oh. Yeah, I do. Give me 1 second just to get my... I have other things on my
Yes, I was
screen.
going to say, who knows what's up there right now?
That's like it's the talk I'm giving later. But this talk we'll do now.
All right, very
Okay.
good.
Okay, this is talk I'm giving now. It's called "Don't Obey Your Boss," and I'm going to start with an example from design. I do a lot of work in design and engineering, and in design, it's really common. And I, in my career, started out with this approach of giving 3 options to a client. You show these 3 logos to your client, and you say, "Which one do you like?" Right? And the client says, "I like this one," and you're like, "Okay, the client is right. I'll go with what they say." And you go ahead and develop the design. What I found in practice is that this led to a lot of frustration for me. We sometimes would have like a lame duck. You know, you get excited about 2 options. You know, one option isn't the best. The client picks it, you're left with it. And the rest of the project, you're just hating yourself thinking, man, I wish they hadn't made this decision, right? So I'm going to give an inspirational story. Dates back from the 80s. And it's about the logo design for the next computer. Not many people know that, or maybe many of you know. Steve Jobs, between Apple in the late 80s and early 90s, he did this company called Next. And to make the logo for Next, he hired this guy, Paul Rand. Paul Rand, pretty like one of the most famous most successful logo designers of the 20th century. He did the IBM logo. Believe it or not, the first logo to ever have stripes. And maybe many more logos you might recognize. UPS, ABC, Westinghouse are here, amongst others. And Paul Rand, the deal was, Paul Rand said, "Steve Jobs, give me $100,000 and I'll give you a logo." He did not give Steve Jobs 3 options. $100,000, mind you, is a lot more then than it is today. And he said, "I'll give you 1 option, and if you don't like it, don't use it." And right? And you look at this and you think, how crazy is this? How can you say, here's this logo, right? And it's a famous story for that reason. I mean, what kind of guts this person must have to do that? But what's interesting, and I want to highlight, is how he did this. You actually can find online the presentation that he gave to Steve Jobs. And he didn't just say, here's the logo, take it, right? He actually gave, for the $100,000, a book going into detail about various ways the logo might look. And he actually explained it, right? And I've looked at this, and actually one of the things he explains is the need for the lowercase e. If you look at the next up there, it kind of looks like exit, the word exit. And he found that with a capital E, you kept seeing exit. He said, listen, we have to make the E lowercase for this reason. And once the E is lowercase, of course, other kinds of considerations come in. So he didn't just present this one solution to Steve Jobs and the company. He explained why. So he didn't give him options. He gave him one answer with an explanation and a rationale. So you're like, great. I'm not a designer. I don't think there are many people who do graphic design and logo design. What does this have to do with being software engineers? Right? As engineers, we're very often in this kind of Dilbert scenario where we hate management. I've met no shortage of software engineers that are just tired of their boss. You know, they're always like, their boss is telling them things. They get disgruntled. 5-10 years into their careers, they're hanging their heads low and hating life. Right? They look at their relationship with their boss as one where they obey their boss. Right? And the point of my talk and what I want to get across to you is, and I want to inspire people to think about, is changing your relationship with your boss and your work, and to never obey. And to turn that obedience into the relationship you see here, which is one of argument. Never accept something from the top down because it's an order. Why is this important? Well, the primary reason, it's kind of like, if you're a designer and you're making a logo for someone, they're not a designer. There's a reason they're trusting you with that job, right? If I go to my dentist and he says, hey, you have a cavity in your tooth, I'm going to take the cavity out. I don't say, no, tell me which 3 of my teeth I might have a cavity in, right? I trust the dentist. In certain fields, doctors and medicine, we expect the practitioner to tell the client or the boss or whoever, the person who's paying, and tell them what they're going to do. My dentist is inflexible about the treatment that he or she will provide. Somehow, as designers and engineers, we get in this other mentality where we're more flexible, right? Okay, if that's what you want, really, that's bad. I'll do it anyway. You're paying me. I'm not going to argue. And I want people to take away from this, and I encourage you to look at Paul Rand, look at the presentation, and look at how he worked and laid it out, is to change that relationship to one where you're always arguing, and you never, never stop arguing until you're convinced, right? And one of the things that happens when you argue is sometimes when you're disobedient, you actually learn. I'm not telling you stick to the one solution. You also need to be listening to that boss or that client in terms of why. And in the process, you will actually discover constraints and aspects of the solution that you may not be aware of. This is very important for the newer engineers in the field. And if you want to know how you get from being a junior engineer to a senior engineer, this is the way you do it. Never accept a solution. Always research and investigate. If you think a solution is wrong, don't just hang your head down and do the work because you're getting paid to do it. Always argue. And this is the thing that will lead you in your career to become a more senior, more aware of everything that shapes a problem, and also more capable of leadership. That's my point. Thank you.
Stephen, I love that. I relate to that a lot. If at some point, my boss and I share the architect role, and at some point he will say, we'll have an argument about something, and we'll get hung up on something, and I'll look him right in the eye and I'll say, all right, at the end of the day, if this is what you want, this is exactly what I'll do because you're the boss. And that always bugs him a little bit, and then I usually get my way anyways.
Yeah.
Yes. Any question from our panelists?
Somewhat of the go on.
No, you go first.
Somewhat of a tangential question. Have you seen the website clientsfromhell.net?
No, but I'm aware of things like that on the internet. Yeah, I'm tired of this culture in our community of complaining. And I myself have gone through a transition of just not accepting it ever. I feel like it took me many years to get the confidence in my career. I talk to some people and they're like, yeah, I'm not Paul Rand, right? I didn't make the IBM logo. Why would anyone listen to me? And my point is that's how you get to be Paul Rand. Yeah.
Yeah, I did relate to it a lot because I think you should always think for yourself. And I'm also tired of people complaining like, I had to do this. I mean, you don't have to do anything. So, yeah, thanks for that.
There's lots of other industries you could go help, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely. But I was wondering what you think about balancing it. Because let's combine our stories. If you're junior, you can also be kind of ignorant without you knowing it, like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
And where you just think you understand the world, but you don't.
Yeah, that's why it's important to have an exposition and argument, discovering the constraints around the decision. Because as a junior person, you just see the island, you don't see the ocean around it. How are you going to learn that ocean? Argument will show you the ocean. Sometimes your boss knows a lot better. They're like, listen, I know all these things. I make the decision. It forces your boss, if they're actually correct, to explain it to you. Yeah. Like, I don't advocate just being disobedient and like, I'm not even going to listen to my boss. That's like a teenager, amateur attitude,
puberty.
Right?
I have that with my kids.
Yeah.
So it's really important to stress that you should ask questions. Why do you think this is a solution? What is the question? And then go into a discussion.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more to a problem than you see at first sight.
Exactly. This is the way for you to sort of shed your idiocy as someone who's new. Yeah.
And that will grow you into being a lead. That definitely will.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people here there's many leads here, but I think there's some people who want a bath, and I think that's the best path to get there. And whenever I work with people who are new to the field, that's what I look for. If I see someone who has that attribute, where they sort of never lie on their back and say, yes, sir, like that's who I want to work with, because I know it's going to lead to a better product for my team, right? Because they're going to be always challenging and pushing at the boundaries of their level in the knowledge worker spectrum. Yeah.
But that's the value of any friendship or relationship. The friends that I have that are dear to me, because we have that radical candor, because we trust each other, they can say, hey, I really kind of disagree with you, and they're not afraid of that. But that means that you have to get that trust almost like at some point so that you feel comfortable and they feel comfortable doing that. But sometimes one of you has got to make the first move.
Yeah, and this can take time, but I think if you find yourself going down that sort of Dilbert path where you're just like, hate my job, I'll do this, just notice that that's happening and realize that, it's not going to be good for you to go down that way. So,
we do have one question from the audience. Which of the piggyback logos, this might require us to go open our laptops back up, but which of the piggyback logos is the lame duck one for you and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I look at those logos and they all look okay. I can kind of look at one and say, oh, I like this one, right? This is often how clients will look at it. They're like, I like green, and that one has green in it. The truth is that you don't actually know what the best logo is without doing research into the company and the brand. Right? The right logo decision has all these things to do with the history of the company, the competitive landscape, what the value proposition is, the iconography, the history of the iconography that's being used in the logo, and the brand values that want to be espoused by the logo. And these are things that many, unless you've done a lot of work in design, you're not used to thinking about these things. And that's what a talented designer and an informed designer will use to make that decision. And the problem with the CEO making the decision, I think we've all seen like the Yahoo logo recently, like the CEO designs a logo, and you're like, what? It's like they're like a great CEO and great business leader, but they haven't spent years studying design and studying logos and how they work. And understanding how and why logos work is necessary to make the decision. And to make the decision, you actually have to understand the particular business. So I can't tell you, with all my experience in design, what the best logo is. And that's why the designer should do that legwork, and then they will know. And that's actually the process that Paul Rand went through. It was a process of constraint discovery. He discovered the forces that needed to shape the logo. It doesn't need to look good in black and white. It needs to look good on a low resolution, whatever the resolution monitor was of the day. He's testing the logos in those ways and thinking about it, so you don't end up in this situation where it's like, I love this logo, and then the boot screen of the computer comes up, and you're like, oh, man, right? It's something that the designer will think through that the CEO on impulse is likely not aware of.
One last question. Do you cringe when you see those like logo generating websites? Do you cringe?
Yeah, this is something, the 99 Design logo generation. Yeah, and I've actually been in processes with that. And it's funny, like the client picked this logo, and it was actually like a cliche logo. There are these sheets with like logos that are used over and over again, and lots of times the people doing those logos will just reuse the same logo. There's certain very cliche logos, and I feel like that's exactly the wrong way to go about getting a strong brand, is to sort of outsource. And that person has no opportunity to research into the company, and no opportunity to research into the brand, and know what's right. They're like, oh, you're a train company. Okay, here, picture of a train, right? And that's how you get a weak brand. I mean, a brand also is so much more than the logo. I actually advocate, if we want to talk about logos in particular, working on other aspects of your branding. If you're starting a company, just like pick a reasonable typeface and just go. Logos, the best logos sort of evolve and emerge over time. But yeah, those crowdsourced logo things are a surefire way to have something that the most important thing for a logo to be is distinctive. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, up next we have Dave Aronson. Did I say that right?
Sorry, no, Aronson.
It's Dave.
Dave. Oh, Dave.
You gotta forgive us from the States.
Close
I
enough.
can't pronounce anything. It's so funny. Some of these questions are fantastic and terrible. And I have to say, when we were starting the Hello World show, we totally used 99 Designs.
Yes, we did.
Mostly because I didn't want to design it and he didn't want to design it. We're like, we just want to kind of put it out there in the ether. And
Yeah, it's better than nothing. I mean, I do advocate getting going. rather than being too precious and letting it evolve over time. Like, probably aren't, I don't know if you're still using that logo.
We are.
Yeah.
Okay, we've heard about people skills, we've heard about design. Well, I'm not so good at that, so I'm going to stick to tech. And I'll tell you about a time I was doing something with immutable data. Believe it or not, I did not look up that Spencer was doing a talk on immutable data before deciding on my subject. And I was treating it the same way as I would normally have done with the regular, ordinary, mutable data that most of us are probably used to dealing with. And sometimes that's a really bad idea. In particular, my introduction to immutable data was when I tried to pick up Elixir, a functional language invented by a guy who actually lives right here in Krakow. And it uses immutable data, as functional languages tend to do. One of the, many of the basic exercises that I was doing to learn it involved taking things off an input queue and doing some processing and putting them in an output queue. So I initially treated them as just regular, ordinary queues. You take something off one, you stick it on the other, and so on, and so on. But let's take a look at what happens when you do that with, with regular, ordinary, mutable data. Let's look in the details. With an element containing the letter A as its data, it's got a pointer to the next node, currently pointing to nothing because it's the last one. And we want to add a node containing B. So we create that with a null next pointer and set the next pointer of the A node to point to that. So far, so good. Same for creating C and D. But if we do that with immutable data, the thing doesn't quite work right. And let's look in detail. We have here A, B, and C, and we want to add D. So we create the node D, and you would think we set the C pointer to point to D. But no, you can't do that because it's immutable data. Instead, we have to create a whole new C element to point to D and throw away the old one. The references that might still exist to the old C element need to be changed. So you would think now we set the node B next pointer to point to C, right? Well, wrong for the same reason. It's immutable. So, and this is the part where I actually finally understood why appending to a list is such a bad idea, we have to create a whole new B to point to C, and likewise for A. So this means that appending to the end of a list in mutable data makes you reconstruct the entire list, taking it from a constant time and very quick operation to being proportional to how many elements are in the list already. And that means that processing the entire input list is no longer a linear time operation, but roughly proportional to the square of the number of items in there, quadratic runtime to use the technical terms. Now let's look at prepending it, which is the usual alternative. We've got the A element already, and we want to prepend B, so we create that, pointing at A, and then we have to, well, do nothing more. We're done. And likewise for adding C and D. Boom, boom. No muss, no fuss, no mutation, no allocation, no garbage created to collect later, and we're back to a very quick operation per unit. That's it. So, questions?
Questions from the panel?
What happens if you want to use an array?
haven't dealt much with arrays per se in Elixir or other functional languages with immutable data. They tend not to use that exact structure much from what I've seen so far. I think Spencer would probably be more of an expert on that. Can you back me up here? You got my back, bro?
I don't know. That's usually I'm one of those business developers who doesn't understand the algorithmic stuff. So when I use libraries that are just like, oh, it's an immutable list, and I don't worry about performance until it becomes an issue in my application. I hope that it prepends data. I hope that the library writer listened to Dave and prepended the data though, but I don't know. I know that things like sequences and lists are much more common much more common to use in languages like F#. Beyond that, I wouldn't necessarily. I would definitely not know for a deeply functional language.
Maybe another question. What happens if you take the C and you just stack pointers at the end? And so whatever the last pointer is, the one you honor, that could preserve your list structure.
So it's sort of pointers all the way down.
Eventually you have too many pointers, and maybe you do a cleanup operation and rebuild the list, but at least...
Well, that sounds rather inefficient. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but we can discuss it after.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud. Anyway, maybe some questions from people with more experience with these kinds of languages.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorite questions is, why T-Rex?
Well, mainly to go with the whole Codosaurus thing. And then the question, of course, is why Codosaurus? And long story short, I was stuck doing just plain old C, not even C++, never mind C#. I was feeling a little obsolete, and I wanted to break into more modern languages. So someone advised me to start blogging, and so I needed a name for the blog. What do I call it? I'm feeling like a dinosaur with this code. Codosaurus. And I stuck them together, came up with Codosaurus as the name of my blog, and then when I went freelance, I made that the name of my business.
Very good. And if you were an agile company, would you be the Velociraptor?
That was a bad dad joke.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, getting to some other good questions that we kind of passed.
Yeah, so the rest of these questions are for the panel in general. That means each one of you get to answer some of them. So I kind of like some of these are pretty cool. Probably the most upvoted one is software engineering really engineering?
Yeah, I mean, without it, like, why would it not be engineering?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I've seen so many different opinions. Like yesterday, the closing keynote, we can see source code as art, but I've had a lot of engineers saying coding is art.
No, it's. I mean, art is an aesthetic expression of values. There are definitely stylistic aspects of it. I think it's closer to design, and that you're solving problems. But I mean, the heart of software engineering is optimization around fixed constraints, and very much that engineering discipline that leverages mathematics.
Perhaps ideally, but I think I would argue that it usually lacks the kind of disciplined rigor and emphasis on quality and repeatable results and so forth.
Is that not what unit testing is?
Yeah, well, not everybody does unit testing either.
Yeah, but even with the interactive, I mean, I do a lot of interactive work where we can't unit test, but it has to repeatably work according to certain expectations.
Yes, it has to work, but it's not always living up to the ideal. Well, then again, neither is real engineering if one contrasts software with that. But I think the rest of them, like the electrical engineers and so forth, get a lot closer to very repeatable. Whereas software engineering tends to be much more different every time. So perhaps in a sense it inherently can't really be reduced to such repeatability. But we can try.
I think there's more to it than just engineering. I kind of have a bad feeling with making the same, making the comparison. Because with engineering, you have these investments, and if you change the constraints, then those investments will
lack the possibility to actually change things around thoroughly. With engineering, I mean, there is a lot of technical depth, and I know that changing your architecture costs a lot of money, but still, you need to prepare for the future much more than in engineering, where you can just put down a building with the knowledge at this moment. So you have to be kind of science fiction, predictive. An algorithm that works in a certain situation won't work in a different situation. Maybe even with the same data, but just with another stack. So you need to be creative. You need to be some kind of predictive. And so I understand where people say it's kind of an art. We are making things that weren't there before. And it's moreover an art because it's not just about the coding. You're also reinventing the world through the processes you are automating. You're making things possible that weren't possible before. Uber wouldn't exist. We all went to this conference with Uber if there was not IT.
Yeah, I mean, you're not convincing me, but I appreciate your argument. I think there are definitely these artistic, like making an Uber. I think, first of all, it is fluid. I mean, there's hard differences between physical world and what we do. Right? Everything can move at any point in time, but there's still the kinds of problem solving that a civil engineer uses in making a bridge feel very similar to me to kind of like, how do I sort this list? And when I code, I'm reusing solutions all the time. There's this artistic side, and I think the cool thing about software engineering is we're exposed to this ability to be artistic. If you look at, say, a demo scene, is that what you guys call it in Poland? The demo scene where people are trying to get the most out of hardware and do really cool visual things. I mean, all of us as coders have this ability to this artistic human interface thing so much more easily than like the typical civil engineer. I think there are layers on top. And I've done a lot of work in the art world and work with a lot of people who do artistic coding where it's like, this is my passion. I'm not doing something for a client, right? I feel like underneath that art side, they're still solving these engineering problems.
I think it's also because it's a much younger field, right? And maybe that's why the question was posed in the first place, is because it is so quickly evolving, whereas if you are a doctor, I mean, yes, some medical treatments may be new, but a lot of it has been standardized for a long time, and so we don't have the exact same thing in software engineering because so much is changing so quickly. Perhaps that is where some of that comes in.
It's also a lot more mathematical. I mean, I think often code is just math rendered in physical form. That's kind of a way to think of software. It's just a physical manifestation of the most abstract thing we have. So I think there's another aspect of it where it's math and design are sort of on the they're just different aspects of the practice.
But I'm not saying that there's no engineering part to it. Yeah. It's definitely, but I'm just saying it is that and a big layer around it.
So
it's
I think we
more than
agree.
engineering.
So we agree.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we actually agree. I'm 100% aligned with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Next question was for Kim. Do you have any experience observing teams that made the move to self-steering, and how much time did it take, and what qualities did they exhibit that helped with the transition?
Yes, I have had that experience at two employers before. Well, the experience was a lot of pitfalls that I didn't see coming. Because, for instance, I really trust people. So I see people who do amazing things, and I see all this knowledge, and I think, okay, I can just facilitate freedom. So I will take the hamburger position between the director, and I will make sure they're guarded, and then say, hey, do your thing. And then they didn't. And I was totally surprised. Like, guys, you have freedom. Do something or something. And I didn't tell them this way, but more like, okay, you can go to every conference you want, learn stuff, and then nobody went. So why? And what I found was I had to talk a lot with people and actually use kind of this model because they weren't able to make this step at once. I also found that self-steering is like a container word. I mean, you can't do anything. So that was also one of the pitfalls. At a certain point, they grew, which was what I wanted. And then I tried to say, okay, we have to build kind of this system with a lot of freedom to actually think of the technology stack and the constraints and to go talking to the customer themselves. But they said, well, we don't know if that's a good plan for this business. And then it's good to ask the question. You never have to obey your boss. But it got to the point where self-steering isn't like that you can also think of the product you're making or the kind of company you are. There are some constraints, and you have to deal with those constraints. And I had to have a lot of talks about that too. So I had to find out a lot about this. What helped was, as I said, talk, but also to have some people who have experienced being in a self-organizing team. Because those people could just be inside the team and reassure the rest, like, oh, no, that's fine. She can say that. That's not our job. That's her job. So we are now going to do our job. And that helped because they had peer-to-peer learning.
So you would help facilitate by also identifying coaches within, like little coaches within each team to say, that have been on self-organizing teams to say, yes, we can do this.
Yeah, but I would hope it would be peers rather than coaches, because coaches is like, okay, I'm going to get management away and then I'm going to put coaches back. Then I think it feels more like a facade. I really want people, natural leaders, who are just coders, giving the right example. So that's very important to me.
Good distinction.
Yeah.
I think I have one more, and that's for everybody. So think of one single piece of advice about how any one of us could be a better developer, or in this case, the actual one was the best developer in the world. But I think that it's impossible to really reach that, right? So if you each give one piece of advice to somebody who does have the desire, they really want to be like the best version of themselves as a developer.
I'd say always be learning, whether it's a new language, a new project management technique, or whatever. Try and pick up one or more important new things, big things, every year.
I would say my piece of advice, and this is about the practice of coding in itself, is to never slack on making your code expressive, like the most expressive way of solving the problem. And it's like everyone has this experience where you write a chunk of code and you commit it, it works, it passes a unit test, and you know it's a little funky, and you don't clean it up. That habit is not sending you on the right path. Always clean it up and always clarify. I'm a big proponent of comments as commentary, trying to express it in human terms, and you should be able to look at that code and it should just be develop a passion for the beauty of this simple and true, honest expression of the best solution to the problem that exists. And I think that path just really leads you to writing awesome code and also being an awesome team member. And do you have a piece of advice? Yeah,
I would be philosopher or something, because I came from management, right? Now, what I would say is always look if you're getting energy and if you're happy, because I only found out recently that if you're doing tasks that are draining for you because they're part of your job, then mostly it's because either you suck at it, so you have to do something you're bad at, nobody likes that, or because the task is obsolete. So as long as you learn to listen to this internal voice, you get to naturally you go do the things that you are very good at and that are of high value. And that will help you to learn every day, because it's the things you are strong at. And then you get the most out of yourself, because you should only do the things that you have some kind of talent for.
That was fantastic. Please give our panel a big round of applause.
Yes. All right, in Poland, it's been a pleasure. This is the end of our Hello World show. Again, find us on the.hw.show. We have a lot of YouTube shows. If you also search for the Hello World show live on YouTube, you can find some examples of some other live shows that we've done. And I have nothing else to say, but thank you very much. You're an excellent audience. Thank you. Great questions.